journey is from me to you and from you to me. I'm Dr. John Robertson, your usual host, and we have our usual co-host, Charles Morse, along with us. Charles, how's it going tonight?
Well, I'm trying to find out myself. I'm trying to get myself together here. So, yeah, well, we have audio.
All right.
How you doing, everyone? Charles Morris, happy to be here with the Journey 2020. Understand this is this a part 2 or part 3? This is kind of like a part 2 of a part 2.
This is part 2 of part 2. I'll go with that. Exactly.
Part 2 of part 2. And so I'm looking forward. And once again, last week we were telling everyone about they've used to looking at our sad face, so we brought something that on the show that we go, oh, okay. And I didn't tell you this, but last week we had the most viewers ever.
Really?
I wonder why.
I wonder.
I guess the word got out.
It must have been. It must have been our knowledge and insight and all that good stuff. But to give our viewers who may not have watched a clue, we're going to introduce them to our two fabulous guests tonight.
Right.
And I'd like to introduce directly to my right, Miss Gail Gardner, and Miss Gardner is a sister extraordinaire. And she is, in addition to being a former educator, she also is the author of a book called Woman to Woman, Gleaning Inspiration and Insight from Our Biblical Mothers. Now, we had encouraged her to bring a book along, but she tells me that it's available with and we'll get to find out where it's available from a little bit later. Okay. And next to her, which may have been a part of the cause of our popularity last week, is Miss Shakara Ames.
Peace, y'all.
Okay. And Shakara is the recruiter for the Sile project. And we'll ask Shakara to describe a little bit about Sile again. And you may wonder tonight why we have the guests that we do have. But we want to talk about, in part 2, the way that relationships, can go sour. The kind of, if you want to call it the dark side of relationships, how they come about, why people stay in them, and also what they can do to rescue themselves from these relationships. So I'm going to start out first with our coordinator, recruitment coordinator, Ms. Shakara Ames, just telling us again a little bit about Sile, because Sile does connect with what Ms. Gardner is going to talk about. Okay?
Sile is a young women's empowerment program. So we serve young ladies from the ages of 14 to 18. It's a program for black girls. We celebrate being black. We celebrate womanhood, sisterhood. We talk about making healthy choices, healthy relationships, what those look like, pregnancy prevention, as well as anything that the young ladies want to bring to the table. So there's a curriculum that we go through. We also have community events. And it's just a program that is especially geared toward them, that they really have fun to when they come to. So that's the gist of what Sile is.
Okay. And it's a well-needed program.
It is. It is.
One of the things we touched on last week, and one of the reasons that we asked Ms. Gardner to come on to the show, is that in many ways, Shakara, you work in a preventive mode.
Yes.
But also, by the time some of the young women get to you, it's beyond a preventive mode, and you've had to deal with young women that are in abusive, or dysfunctional relationships.
Yes, we see a lot of different things.
Okay, and that's something that our community often doesn't like to talk about, doesn't like to deal with, wants to duck its head. And I remember last week we had said that it was critical for us to deal with that.
Definitely.
And in doing that, I'd like to ask Ms. Gardner, in your experience, how did you come about to be concerned with women's issues with abuse and at times violence? How did that come about?
I, as a child, was a victim of sexual abuse by my stepfather. And as years went on, my behavior was, I was acting out. School, well, I was a smart girl, but they were constantly putting me in other classes because of my behavior. And as time went on, became promiscuous. At the age of 14, I had my first baby. And by the time I was 16, I had a second one. So during that time, my personality and how, which I call now post-traumatic stress disorder, at the time, I just was not one of the most pleasant people, always moody. And I was not aware that as time went on that I would eventually fall into different other patterns of abuse, what we call re-victimization. And I remember back in 1989, I was in the church, you know, a good Christian person, like I would think, and going through the order of let's say promotion, and yet there was at the time rapes going on in the Washington Shores community, and my house was one of those.
That's Washington Shores in Orlando,
in Orlando, Florida. And I remember going to my office. I was working at the church, and I was going to my office, and while I was moving down the aisle, all of a sudden I just stopped, and I began to cry, and I said, God, why is this happening to me? It wasn't the first time, but it was, I was around 40 years old, I think, at the time, and memories started coming back that I wasn't aware of. So as time went on, I began to look further into counseling. And I knew then if I could help myself, because then the light came on. The sun was really shining. The grass was really green. You know, this revelation came. I knew if I could get some help, and if it did that much for me, then if I could convince others.
And for those of you who haven't had the pleasure of meeting our guest who has just come into our studio, and I just learned tonight that we're going to have to call this our studio. The person that has just come on is none other than Monica May, and Monica is one of the most active community advocates here in the Orlando, Florida area. I also like to call her friend, sister, and someone who I can count on to let me know what is happening and what is real. So again, welcome, Monica.
Thank you very much. It's good to be here.
All right. We were just starting to talk about some of the impact, of dysfunctional and abusive and violent relationships as the dark side of the relationship issues that we have to deal with. Last week we talked about some of what the challenges were, but this week we're focusing in on some at times painful, at times for our community embarrassing issues, but issues that we feel that we need to talk about. And for Charles and myself, we felt that it was incumbent on us as African American men to have the women's perspective represented in a way that we could inform and educate our entire community about some of the issues around sexual abuse, about domestic violence, and about the psychological impact of dysfunctional relationships. So that's kind of where we are. So I want to just throw something out, and I love it that we have this panel of strong, beautiful black women that are here. I could just bask, in this environment. But to get back to our topic tonight, and Monica, I want to ask you, in terms of domestic violence, and by the way, I was listening to your show this morning where you talked about this being domestic violence. Is it week, or month?
Well, October is when we typically focus on domestic violence, but if you are living, domestic violence happens every day, 365, almost every hour.
Right.
And I can say every 30 minutes, every 20 minutes, every 10 minutes, there is someone being violated. Tomorrow we're walking for domestic violence. It takes courage as a part of the Harbor Houses, just their impact on the community, where we'll go door to door, putting door knockers, door hangers of information on people's homes to let them realize what is domestic violence. What do you do when you believe you've heard something happening to a neighbor or a sister or something? Who do you get in touch with? When is the proper time to call someone?
That's right.
And that's in hopes that people will not close their eyes to it, because we tend to, if we hear someone yelling, banging up against a wall, we sometimes say, oh, that's just their problem. Well, if that person that's banging up against the wall winds up dying and you could have made a phone call to 911, what is your conscience going to feel like? So that's what we're doing tomorrow. And that's why I say, October was Domestic Violence Awareness Month, but just like breast cancer happens in months other than October, we need to take focus on that. And I'm sure my sisters would agree with that. Everyone on this panel has either experienced domestic violence ourselves, or we know someone who has. And if they haven't died, they certainly have experienced it in some shape or form. It's not only physical abuse, it's emotional.
That's right.
And the scars are very deep and they last very long.
That's right. Yes, they do.
One of the things, Monica, just as you were mentioning about the scars being very deep and lasting very long, Ms. Gardner had started talking about the impact, of abuse, on her life, and at the age of 40, those feelings surfacing. And I wanted to go back a bit, and before that, and when you had said that in coming up as a young person, that you were acting out, and so many of our young people we see, quote unquote, acting out. In my psychological practice, I often see that as angry, often closed-guarded young people who have a difficult time. And I wanted to see if you would comment on that, and if Shakara, in your work in CLA, if you've encountered that, and that kind of angry, oppositional kind of personality.
Sure. Okay. In CLA, I guess I'll go before CLA. I've had a lot of experience. It's just in life working with young people, and most of the time when I see the acting out from young people, it is just something that they've been through. They have no way to express something that they're holding that's bottled. Different experiences that they've had, they sort of manifest themselves in other ways. They haven't quite found the outlet or the words to articulate what's going on, so it has to come out in some way. Otherwise, you just sort of end up deteriorating. So I've seen that quite a lot. It's definitely a problem. And something that needs to be addressed as well. But I know you had also asked her, because it's something you've actually experienced.
Yes.
I have not only experienced it personally, but as an educator, I saw it every day, especially in the African American community.
Yes.
I tell the story of how I would get after one of my students every day. She was late to my first period class, and there's an attitude that goes along with being embarrassed, and you think you got the answers. And I was raised in Harlem and, you know, born in Harlem, raised in the South Bronx. I figured
Yeah,
I could go toe to toe with you, you know.
Right.
So you didn't have an attitude, as far as I was concerned, because I had the ultimate attitude. And I got after this girl every single day till they called me over, one of the administrators, and said, you know, I just want you to back off of her a little. I said, well, okay. I said, but every day she comes this, I got to get this attitude from her. And I learned her, she just can't walk over me. She said, Miss Gardner, she said, understand this. She says, her mother leaves for work at 5 o'clock in the morning, and her mom's boyfriend is there, and she can't leave for school until she puts out. And this was going on in the household. The mother supposedly didn't know anything about it. And so I just, you know, all my insides just crumbled, because I had really, when I should have been more compassionate, but I didn't know. And I'm trying to prove I'm going to be, you know, I'm the teacher, the tough one, and you just can't. And it just changed my whole outlook on this whole thing. So acting out came with the territory from a lot of our young people, our African American girls, especially a lot of times, you know, not knowing how to express. And if they did express anything that had to do with what they were going through, they're told they're lying, or they're told that you don't tell anybody. I have clients, I'm executive director and a counselor with Rafa Soul Care and Empowerment Institute, and the clients that come to me, I can tell you, I have been sexually abused, usually what they put on the intake sheet. And that's one of the things. They come to me about something else, but by the time we get through the conversation and I looked on the intake sheet, when we're talking, tears come about certain things, and we come to find out this person has not only lost a bereavement over a death of a loved one, but lost that innocence at some place, and they're still depressed and crying about it. So it goes so many ways, and by the time we get a hold of our young people, I hate to use the term the damage has been done, but we're talking now of actually trying to really build a support system and bring up some things that they would rather forget. You know, so they act out. You know, they act out. It goes along. Then the promiscuity. You know, the promiscuity is thick.
I think a big part of it is the way we communicate with our young people from the household.
Yes.
As young people, we're always told what happens in this household stays in this household.
Yes.
And I know I've said that to my own child, but not meaning if something illicit happens. And I think that as Black mothers, we need to be very conscious of who we bring around our children, especially our girls.
That's right.
And because these things have happened to us, we have to break the cycle. It's a generational cycle.
Yes,
it's a curse.
It's
It
a
really
curse.
is. Because we have been raped, robbed, and destroyed of our innocence since early days. I don't know
That's
if anyone
right.
saw 12 Years a Slave.
Yes.
If anyone's
I
seen
saw that.
any slave story or
That's
read
right.
any book about our ancestors, the fact of rape has always been there. White men have
That's
always
right.
desired Black women, and they've taken
That's right.
from us. And oftentimes it lends itself to grandmothers having to
right.
deal with it, mothers having to deal with it, and now their daughters having to deal with it. And everyone just kind of pushes the emotion from rape, robbery, stealing under the carpet.
That's right.
And all we're trying to do as women who incur young people, young girls, frequently, is to just talk about it. We've got to get it
Yes.
in the open. And we've got to let people know that it is wrong.
Yes.
It's wrong.
That's right. It's wrong. And with that comes how it's communicated in the church. I did an article last year regarding how the church can help abuse victims. And one of the things is begin to talk about it from the pulpit, let people know it's okay to have, to get some help. I'm just the messenger standing here, and so I can't do it all for you. But God has put people out there to help to bring people to a place where they can communicate, and it's all right. The secrecy, all of those things, and the distrust that has gone on in the community itself. So it's not just the household. We brought that into the house of God, and it's really now getting to the place where I have pastors sending me people because they just don't have the skills or the time. The numbers are so huge, and it's becoming overwhelming.
People do run to the church for healing,
Yes.
but they aren't always receiving it there.
Right.
And in many instances in our churches, it's being perpetuated
Yes.
from the pulpit.
Yes.
The pastor sometimes preys on women that he may find to be weak, or women that he may find appealing in any kind of way.
Yes.
And because these women have come to the church for healing and they're searching for a man of God to deliver them,
Yes.
and that's the whole thing, deliver them.
That's right.
When really healing comes from within.
From within. That's
You
right.
can be led toward it, but healing really
right.
comes from within. You've got to want to own what happened,
That's right.
turn the victimization around,
That's right.
but feel good about it in the process. And that's where we come in as those sisters under the cloth, sisters,
right.
you know, who have gone through something, or
Sure.
sisters who have experienced it through teens,
Yes.
or sisters who have gone through it ourselves.
I concur.
You know,
That's
so
right. That's
One
right.
of the things that
That's
I think
right.
is very important as we're talking about the pastors, one of the concerns that I have and many African American men have is the knowledge that some of our brothers are some of the perpetrators of the same abuse. As everybody remembers, the color purple.
Yes.
But again, the color purple is happening in this day, age, and time. And so we need to, in addition to educating our young girls, and that is absolutely critical, I feel that we also need to educate our young boys.
Yes.
Monica, as you were saying, that they're preying on vulnerable young women is just not acceptable. And so we have as a community to truly be that village that educates our children in terms of doing no harm, to each other.
Yes.
And I think that the first step comes the education. And I like Shakira and the CLA's program, nurturing the young women and giving them that sense that they are somebody. Because, and I want to get back to Miss Gardner, and as you talked about the sense of promiscuity as a young person, many people would look and say, oh, promiscuity, oh, that she just wanted to quote Spike Lee, that she just had to have it, okay? But not knowing the reason for that promiscuity.
Yes, that's right.
That the promiscuity was not about pleasure seeking as such,
That's right.
but was seeking self-acceptance, not only self-acceptance, but feeling that you were worth something
That's right.
to someone. But could you talk about that a bit?
When you were saying that, I reminded my grandmother's words, they tell you to fast. That
Yes.
was the term,
Yes,
fast.
exactly.
And she's a fast child, a fast girl, and I've heard that so many times, but it was the need to want to be loved, to be cared for. And so you tend to go after people that show you a little attention. That's why we have so many prostitutes a lot of times on the streets, because somebody acted as though they loved me for who I am, but it's actually they're preying on you more so than anything else. But the neediness takes over. That neediness.
That.
Yeah. There's a neediness that just I need you, and we're not talking about a physical need. We're talking emotional need. It's emotional.
The one thing that I think is missing in a lot of households is those fathers,
Yes.
the father figure. And I
Yes.
mean a real man.
That's right.
I don't mean just
Brethren Britches, they used to call them.
I don't mean just Mr. Bob.
That's
who
right.
happens to be
That's
there.
right.
No, that's not what I'm talking about. Every girl needs to feel secure. And that's why I say, as women, as mothers,
Yes.
we have to teach our children how to feel secure within themselves.
That's right.
But the other thing is that to take away that victimization, and you got to own who you are. You've got to teach them their confidence.
That's right.
But we also have to teach them sexuality too.
Yes.
Because with sexuality, after a certain age, that girl's hormones start working.
That's right.
And based on what she's received in terms of knowledge,
That's what's on
if
thing
she's
she
not
has.
shown the right things, she's not going to understand. Or if she's not in an atmosphere where it's comfortable to talk about, I have this certain feeling. She's going to act out on that feeling.
That's right.
That's human nature.
That's
Secure.
right.
Part of
That's right.
I was going to say part of the promiscuity a lot of times too is them wanting to feel in control of something, because a lot of the girls, when you talk to them, they think they have it under control and they think they're the ones doing the manipulating and they're the ones who are making that path, but really they are sort of just falling into a trap that a lot of us fall into. But if you talk to them, they really think they are the ones who have it in control.
Yes.
It's up to them to make whatever happen. It's their decision. And then when you break down that wall, you really see that they don't have
babies.
a
They're babies.
Yes.
They're babies.
and they don't have a clue.
That's right.
Yes.
That's right.
What's going on?
Exactly.
That's right. I'm
Exactly.
thinking too of you'll find when you have someone who is dealing with sexual abuse and have not had the support that it takes to encourage them to come out. I think a lot about Elizabeth Smart, how her family kept her to keep her whole as she is. She had that great family support when she was a victim. If you have not that family support or the church support, that means they have to know about what happened to you and they support you. That has not, sometimes they know what's happened to you, but there's no support there because they don't know what to do with it. With the need to be in control because you have not been able to. You have what I call emotional bullies, emotional bullies. And it's because I have not had, I could not be in control of myself at that time. Somebody was in control of me, so now I'm going to control someone else. And you wind up in those type of relationships for re-victimization. For one thing, you'll always know that perpetrators have generally been victims themselves.
Absolutely.
And we have to look at that perspective. The other thing is that they, I remember another old saying, where the person is a sick chicken that picks at another chicken. And so in other words, you have a person who's insecure, who's been a victim, and now he finds someone who's weaker than him.
Hurt people.
Hurt people. That's right.
It's a cycle, and in the African American community, I really think it's up to people that are in the know to just go in and do family discussions.
Yes.
And I think that's one of the things that, as I develop the nonprofit that I'm working on now, it's just based on communicating. It's just based on breaking down the walls that we have as Black people in our families, in our communities. How do I come across? Well, when you speak to someone, when you speak to your children, and you're always yelling at them, you're always speaking in a harsh tone, that's how they're going to come across.
That's right.
You do what you know.
That's right.
That is that harsh tone acceptable in the world? Not for everyone and not in every instance.
That's right.
How are we speaking? How are we giving out information? How are we making our children feel? Are we giving them the power they need to have?
Right. And not understanding, you touched on it earlier, that when you don't bring things like that to the table and make it okay to talk about sexuality and those feelings and what you're feeling, it makes it that much easier for someone else to come in and
Yes.
especially someone who can come in and sort of seem like an authority, which is usually the guy, who can come in and seem like some sort of authority because he's had experience, to tell her how it's supposed to be, how it's supposed to look, how she's supposed to feel. So definitely, like you said, just making that a conversation that is normal and is comfortable to be had. And if it can't be in the household, then we do need to have in the community.
More CLAs.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
More CLAs and just
Exactly.
opportunities to
Yes.
talk.
Definitely.
You're talking about educating at Rafa Soul Care. One of the things we are doing is partnering with our African American professional community. Of course, Dr. Robertson and a few others. And I just met with some of our African American pastors this week, and the whole idea is to partner with them so that not only can we help them with the counseling and referring to counselors between the two organizations and the groups, but also to come in and to talk with to the congregations and to the different organizations, and to get them to understand what abuse looks like.
Yeah.
And Uncle Joe was a dirty old man, but it was still abuse. That every time he wanted you to sit on his lap, you know, and just so many things, and we take it for normal or hiding behind. And I can use this. You can hide behind the facade of the church itself, or of any organization or anything that you're doing, because you can blot out the pain. You can dull the pain until you have to confront it. And a lot of times people don't want to confront it. And so they continue to operate in an abnormal way of thinking about things until either they give it up, you know, and just can't go any further. The relationships never stay together. Relationships are always painful, including not just between the man and woman, but the children, other family members. The dissension is there always. There's always some type of a strain, you know, within the relationship part, because you never can relate. I also tell people that forgiveness is another element that comes, that is a process. It depending on what the offense has been. If it's been an offense against your person, it's even more. And so to just tell people, well, you got to forgive, you know, just tends to drive them away. They might be sitting there every day, every week, they're coming around you, whatever, but they have actually blotted out anything that's going to come on the other side of that. The trauma that has been experienced is called, I guess, in clinical terms, it's stuckness. Stuckness, you know, it's a real word. Stuckness.
That's a good way to breaking it down.
Yes, you are stuck where the trauma has, you know, begun. I have a family member like that is still in that place and can't understand why no one else seems as though they're not concerned, because we've moved on, but they have not, because they don't know how. And so you have people who are behind that and putting themselves in that position, that they don't want to come from out of it, or the ones who don't know how to come from out of it. And so we go around and try to talk to people and talk to communities and talk to women's groups and talk to family groups, talk to children and PTSA, you know, in some of the smaller schools, and do whatever to let them know it's time. We have the Jerry Sandusky issue because it was the silence that you kept in that time. You didn't tell anyone, like you said. So now we're trying to get people to talk about it. It's okay. And it's okay. It doesn't mean you don't love anybody, you don't love God, you don't love, you know, it means that now I need to start healing. And that's the beginning of healing, is disclosure. So yeah, it's that communication, that's being able to speak it.
I want to break in just for a quick second. I know that we are talking about abuse and violence. Sometimes individuals in our community don't recognize what abuse really is. Often we may think about it as being hitting someone or physically slapping someone, etc. And we talked about some of the results of it, the acting out, the needing to be in control, etc. But what does abuse look like, again, aside from the physical part of it, because I think that may be more difficult. And in our community, often we tend to be tolerant of various kinds of communication
Yes.
that could be abuse. So what does that look like? Okay.
I just think at its very core, abuse is anything, and I do mean absolutely anything, words, actions, manipulation, anything, any tactic used to gain power over someone should be considered abuse, because it's an abuse of your own power, it's an abuse on another person, it's stepping into the bubble that they should have for themselves, their sacred space, stepping into their mind and manipulating and getting them to do things that they wouldn't do otherwise for your own personal gain. So you can feel more powerful over them is abuse. Definitely is how I consider it at its very baseline.
Okay.
I see it as the taking advantage of a person of lesser strength
Yes.
than you have.
Yes.
Each of us encases strength, and that's something that we all need to know. We're all born, if we're born physically intact, we have 5 senses. The sense of taste, smell, sight, hearing, and sound.
Right.
The one sense that has to develop over time, and it's a constant thing, is your esteem.
Yes.
And when people tear into that esteem because you have shown that there are holes in it, those people can infiltrate those holes, and it is through the mental abuse, the verbal abuse, the physical abuse, alcohol abuse.
Yes.
Okay? Sharing in alcohol as a way to lighten the mood.
Yes.
And you realize that person has not the strength to go past 2 drinks.
That's right.
And you know that. So you keep plying them with it. Drugs also. If you know that they have a propensity towards getting high. I think that those are ways of abuse.
Right.
I think it's abuse when we don't share knowledge
Yes.
with people. I think abuse comes in so many different ways.
It
When you
does.
hold back knowledge,
Yes.
when you hold back caring, when you hold back hugs, you're
Yes.
abusing your children.
Yes.
When you hold back opportunities to grow,
Yes.
you want to keep someone in your same space. Growing up in the projects, you were made to feel that if you were smart, you were dumb.
That's
Something wrong
right.
with
That's
you.
right. That's right.
That's abuse.
That's right.
Not allowing a person to be all that they can
Yes.
be is abuse.
That's amazing. Yeah, I concur with both of you. I think you covered it. When you were talking about abuse in the projects, I grew up in the projects, and I remember not being allowed to. I was abused or bullied, and it was not by the girls; it was by boys, and couldn't understand why. And I was not the most attractive or prettiest of the girls. And back then, before James Brown told us it was all right to be black,
Right. There you
you
go.
know, I had to wait for James to say it's okay to be black.
Isn't that something?
You know?
Isn't that something the media was,
Yeah.
setting the tone
That's
even
right.
then?
That's right. That's right. So before then, I was ashamed of who I was because I was my esteem. Now, mind you, during that time, there was also the sexual abuse going on, and so, my friends who I'm still friends with today, since we were 7 years old, I just got to told them that about 3 years ago. We met together. But they began to understand why I was the way I was.
Right.
And
You
so,
probably didn't even understand.
No.
See, and that's what I'm saying. What are we
That's
exuding?
abuse. Yeah.
What are we exuding?
Yeah.
And those are the community discussions I want to have.
Yeah.
What are you exuding?
That's
What is
right.
this behavior? What is this sassiness? Where is that coming from?
Yes.
What is this standoffishness? Where is that coming from? Because I was the one that was, came across this shot, but was really standoffish. Didn't want you to get in my circle because you might see what's happening
Yes.
to me or inside of me, and I'm already feeling dirty,
Right. And everybody knows.
and everybody doesn't know, and that's the whole thing.
Yeah.
And that's the scary piece, because so many of our girls are walking around with all this baggage.
Yes.
Right.
That they will unload at some point in their life on the wrong person.
Yes. Yes.
And it won't be understood.
Right.
Never
That's right.
understood.
Right.
You know, so that's abuse.
That's right.
That's abuse. I too was bullied,
Mm-hmm.
but I'm not the kind that you can bully for very long, because while I have a long length I have good tolerance.
Yes.
When I snap, when I've had enough, I've had enough.
Yes.
And I will talk you into leaving me alone,
Yes.
leaving me alone. But at some point, I am going to snap.
Yes.
So I wasn't a good bully victim,
But you said
but I was bullied.
Right.
when you take off those earrings,
I'll let it go for a
Grease
minute
your
now.
face and tie your head up with a rag.
Because while you were thought to be, imagine being light-skinned and having a face that looked like a strawberry, because that's how much acne you had.
Yeah.
That was me.
Okay.
Wore glasses and wore them from the cheap drawer because we couldn't afford it. You know, when I talk about communication with young people and their parents, I started by opening up myself, and I do it in the form of a teen letter, and I read this letter to an audience, and in the end, letting them know that what I've just disclosed or what I've shared with you as an unknown teen, I never use a name,
Yes.
was my life.
Yes.
So I'm able to, in that letter, talk to them about the sexual abuse.
Yes.
Talk to them about the drug abuse, the alcohol abuse, the pregnancies, the misshaped ideas that I had about myself. I'm able to share that in a letter. So when they see how many holes I had in my own game and where I am now, they're like, everybody, while you could hear during the letter,
Yes.
because it's very graphic. They then begin to open up, and there's never a dry eye. And I remember the first time disclosing all of this information, I did it purposely so that my daughter, who was about 7 or 8 at the time, would understand where her mom had been.
Yes.
And I did it inside of a church in a country.
Yes.
It was, and the church, if you saw the church from outside, it was rocking from side to side, you know, praising whatever, because everyone in that, or the adults in the church,
Yes.
could identify with something that had
Could
happened
relate.
in that letter.
And
That's the thing. All moms have been there.
Monica, I'm sorry. Monica, one of the things that I did bring up last week while we were talking was I said that I have actually heard your stories.
Is that why you brought me here?
But one of the things that I did bring up last week was that when I witnessed you tell your story, and then when you finish, you pointed out we need to pull this girl aside, where you were able to pinpoint someone that had been abused. And for sure, and later on, of course, once you took the girl outside and you talked to her, she had been abused, you know, and I've seen you do that more than once, you know, because of course I've seen you talk many times. And that was one of the things that I did talk about last week, was that your ability to be able to see that yourself. You know?
Now here's one of them sayings: it takes one to know one.
That's right. That's right. That's
You
right.
know, and to not be ashamed. It's your life. You gotta own it.
Thank you.
right.
It happened to you,
Yes.
and there are a couple of ways to deal with it.
That's
Either
right.
you deal with it and it's done, or you deal with it, or you don't deal with it and you wallow and you don't grow that
No,
way.
you don't.
You know, so I want to be happy.
Yes.
I want to be happy without the drugs.
That's
I want
right.
to be happy without the alcohol. I want to be happy with the pain that I felt, the
Yes.
pain that I've endured, and the pain that's going to happen tomorrow.
Yes.
But if you own it and you can feel it,
Mm-hmm.
it makes
That's
a
right.
difference.
Yes.
So that's the point that I'm at, but it takes time.
Yes.
So when you show that your stuff stinks too,
Right.
Yes.
more people are willing
That's
to
right.
open up
Yes.
about just how funky theirs
That's
is.
right.
And
That's
then
right.
some healing can begin. Then some sharing can begin.
That's right.
So I think if we begin to do community dialogue on
Yes.
that level, I think then we can grow. Then our children can see their value.
Yes.
Then the parents will begin to go and get jobs.
Yes.
You
Yes.
understand? I think then we will come out of the cocoons that we've put up around ourselves. But if you've ever seen a butterfly try to get out of a cocoon, what does it do? It has to
It has
work.
to work at it.
You have to
That's
work
right.
to heal. It's not through osmosis.
No, it's not.
Right.
You have to face it,
Right.
and you have to want to climb up out of it. So-
And isn't it, in what you're talking about as well as Dr. Robinson, a lot of it has to do with the embarrassment, being ashamed, and also feel as if though you're an alien, as if though you're the only one, and no one can relate to you. And a lot of times you feel there's something wrong with you.
Yes.
Oh, absolutely.
You know.
There is a book. It's called Bruised But Not Broken. And I wrote a chapter in this book. And I let my male cousin, who has gone through the gamut in terms of street life,
Yes.
read it when he came to visit me one time. And he looked at me and he said, I had no idea.
That's right.
I had no, and we're close. I had no
That's
idea.
right.
We have this innate shield that comes up,
Mm-hmm.
and it is so hard to penetrate that you can get away and you can get through life.
That's right.
But are you really getting away? And are you
Exactly.
really making it through life?
Exactly.
So it really is time. It's about healing.
Yes,
And the
it is.
forgiveness. Wow. I don't want to hog it. But another impactful evening was I went to, this is another project that I want us to work on.
Okay.
Is a week-long project for girls, a leadership camp for girls. But I did one evening, this was last year, and you know I have to get up really early. Well, I went and did the workshop in my pajamas.
Ah.
And I did the letter, but we ended up with the forgiveness prayer.
Yes.
And it's just something that I made up through over the years of working with teens and putting them through tactics to forgive their moms for talking so harshly to them,
Yes.
to forgive their dads for touching them in that way that they didn't think was really right, or their brother for doing that to them, or uncle, forgiving their teacher for not giving them a chance to speak up. You know, so I went through all the things that a teenager would go through. One by one, by one, by one, by one, you heard the outburst of crying. And what it was we then wrote the thing down on a small piece of paper, and I give people trunks. I leave them with these little small replicas of trunks.
Yes.
That's our baggage. You know, we could put
Right.
everything into this trunk. Inside the trunk is a blank slip of paper, and I give them a pen. Now you write down that thing that you're most ashamed of and that you want to be forgiven
Yes.
for. And then we took our trunks with the written pieces of paper that only they could see, and we went outside and we burned everything.
Yes.
And with that comes the release, and it's a physical release because you can see it.
Yes.
But the spiritual release is I'm praying over them the whole time, and then we're just praying that although we've asked for forgiveness, for us to forgive ourselves.
Yes.
Cause we didn't know.
And that's really what
That's
it's
it.
for.
That's it.
Right
That's
there.
what
The
it's
guilt.
for.
Yeah. Carrying the
In
guilt.
order for us to move forward, I had
It's
to forgive
yourself.
myself of some of
That's
the
right.
things that are in that letter that I reviewed. I had to to forgive myself.
Yes. That's right.
I wouldn't be where I am today if I didn't.
You have to. That's right. And you have to realize that you're not the guilty one. That transference, you know, we take on the guilt of something that somebody else did, and having to live through that is difficult.
Just talk a little bit more about that, you know, taking on the guilt, because that's something that I've seen, you know, in my clinical practice so often, that the victim, the one who has been preyed upon, often feels that, as was said before, it must have been something
Yes.
that I did It must have been something wrong with me. It must be something that I attracted this person or this situation. Could you just talk about that a little bit?
As you remember, I said that I was going down the hallway, well, now down the aisle, going to my office one evening, and when I stopped in the middle of the floor and said, God, I need help, and I don't know what's wrong with me. I felt then as though I needed to shed, I had been carrying the guilt and the shame. If I can go into a little bit of a story here, short, just a little bit here. In scripturally, can I use that?
Absolutely.
Since that's me, you know.
We always include a little scripture in our show.
Thank you. Just want to make sure it's okay. Scripturally, if you remember reading that Adam and Eve were created, and they were naked, and they had no shame. That word shame means they had integrity. And the word integrity comes from the word integral, integer. You remember the integer, we talk about whole numbers. So in other words, they were whole, they were made whole. And it wasn't until the sin that they became, that they began to cover themselves up. And so we're created in God's image and likeness without shame until then. We had integrity. So when we find ourselves in a state of being shameful, we lose that integrity. We take on the sin of someone else. Not only did they sin against you, but now your whole thinking, your attitude, everything, it goes into a state that is considered sinful. Into the place where you can't forgive, don't want to forgive, don't want to talk, your attitude is, not, and all those things come about all because of what someone else did, and now you have taken on that. So the word shame in itself means that once again we're not whole, we are not all together in who we were created to originally be, and the guilt of what someone else did, we're wearing it. And it has caused us that we wear that cloak of guilt and shame. So it's something to get through that. We go back to peeling away the onion, It's a little bit of this, a little bit of that. That's why forgiveness is a process. And when we try to force people, you've got to forgive him. You've got to forgive him. And they go, and don't let it be someone also who's in the congregation of people or in an organization, what have you. Well, people tend to go with the one that forgave, but because you didn't, when it was against, the sin was against you, now you tend to be ostracized, and everyone's worried about you. I've seen that happen. So forgiveness is a process, and people have to work through that process, and you have to give them time to do that. And that's where they live by grace. That's where grace comes in, because you have to live through the process and allow them to be, as they come into the knowledge of, of the truth and within them. That's important.
Very good. All right.
This was a powerful evening.
Absolutely.
Yes, I like it.
And as you notice, both Charles and I, we just love to talk.
Y'all have said too much.
Exactly. Out of prudence.
Oh, that's amazing.
Because the information, the knowledge, and the sharing that the three of you have given this evening is absolutely priceless. And so our silence was a silence of appreciation, of reverence for what all three of you had to say.
Appreciate that.
One of the things that I did want to say was that when I think back when I was young and not knowing, not having positive male mentors, when I think about the conversations as a child, when it comes to dating and girls and all the things that that we knew or that we thought we knew as young men, wanting to have relationships, not bad relationships, but just as we, what we knew. And as I sit and I listen, and I'm thinking about some of the damage that we do, not knowing the damage that we do, not intentionally.
Yes.
We're just ignorant of just who we are and who we should be. And as I got older, once I started to understand the woman that God created and her makeup, then I kind of put something on myself in reference to the position that a woman would put herself in, knowing her makeup. And then I say, well, I have to be accountable now because I understand her makeup.
That's right.
Okay, so even though a door may be open for me to walk through, can't walk through that door. Where years ago I would have walked through that door, because now I understand her makeup and what she's attached this to this to this to this. And I said, I can't open that door because I know what's going to come with it. Where before, when I was younger, I had no idea what came with this, just simply because I didn't understand her makeup.
Exactly.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you.
That was powerful.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yes.
Gosh, thank you.
Oh, what?
Yes.
You know?
Yes.
And that comes from
Powerful.
male mentoring on that perspective.
Yes.
You know, because you have some males that are mentoring and they're mentoring from a wrong perspective.
Yes.
But if you can teach a man how to really understand and honor, and then also help a woman get to know herself better. And it doesn't always have to be in an intimate fashion.
Right.
That's
You
right.
know?
Yeah. Well, the thing is, when I think of, and that's what we were talking about this earlier, when we were talking about, relationships, and I was trying to think of when we were talking about Austin, who, when I said he was so much more mature than I was when I was 16, and I tried to put myself in his place, and I'm trying to think, how could I have gotten to where Austin was at 16? There's no way that I don't think that I could have been there.
Right. But by yourself.
Well, just where I was from,
Yeah.
who was around me, my coaches, and just how we were taught life. And so when you look at that, I sit there all the time. Even now I go, how could I have been different? And I don't think I could have been. I think the path that I had to take to learn what I needed to learn, even though there was some hard knocks there, because as I say, never walked up to anything. This is the thing that I say when I'm talking to women. I've never woke up with an intention of, hey, how you doing? I just want to hurt you. I want to break your heart. I've never walked in a room and had that on my mind.
Yes.
But if you go talk to somebody I dated, they may go, yes, he did. But if I didn't know, if it came to be that, it wasn't because that was my intent. You make mistakes, you learn life, and you live life. So with that being said, once I learned the makeup of myself, once I have a better understanding of the makeup, who God made us and how he made us, then some things became clearer. So.
And with that clarity, I think that we went out for our time. So as we like to say on the journey, that the journey is from me to you and from you to me. And with that, we hope that we'll see you here next week, and we'll have another dynamic panel in our growth and our education. Good night, family.